You know when a brilliant idea hits you in the middle of doing something else, only to be lost because you didn't have a quick way of capturing it. But here's the truth that no one tells you. The perfect system isn't something you can download. In this video, we'll build our own custom system coding a Raycast extension combining Notion's flexibility with Raycast speed. As I've started to take my content creation more seriously, I quickly realized that capturing and organizing ideas was becoming a real challenge. You need a system that not only stores your ideas, but helps you refine them into actual content and plan them across different platforms. That's why I created this Notion template that gives you everything you need, from quick idea capture to content scheduling, all organized around your main content pillars and platforms. This is a template I created, which you can download for free in the description below. From here, I can quickly create new ideas. For example, if I have an idea for a YouTube video, I can just click that button and I will have a new page populating the ideas database here, which has new YouTube video. It has the status of idea, platform YouTube, and a button to repurpose this idea later on. If we click into it, we can see that I can pick a content pillar, which is basically the 4 categories I create my content under. So we can pick one here if we want. We can set a date for when we want this to go live. It has the platform YouTube status of idea, can be moved to other statuses depending on the state of the idea. We can rate it, of course. If this were to be a repurpose of another idea I had, that original idea would show here, and I can also repurpose from within here. So let's say we want to plan this idea. We can simply fold out the content schedule and we can just drag and drop on the day we want to plan that idea for. And in this view, the content schedule, you can also filter them by status. So for now, this is in the idea stage, but let's imagine we wrote a script in here and it's published. So let's change the status to published and it will be over here instead. Let's say I want to create a blog post based on this idea. I can click repurpose. We'll see I have a new idea created here. And we can also see that we have a link to this new idea from this YouTube video because this post is a repurpose of this content. If we go into this new one, we can see that the original content, I can always get back to it. It's this YouTube idea, kept the same rating, kept the same content pillar as my original idea. And I can continue to plan and move this idea along the schedule. We also have the platforms, which are the platforms I post my ideas on and which I could select from the platform property of the idea. And we also have the content pillars. And in those platforms and content pillars, I have a bit of text, why the platform and so on, and what role it has. And for the content pillars, of course, I have some info about that content. I'm making this template available for free, and even just using it as it is will dramatically improve your content planning workflow. You can grab it using the link in the description. But here's where it gets interesting. While having a solid Notion setup is great, opening Notion and navigating to the right database every time inspiration strikes isn't ideal. That's why I decided to leverage Raycast, my favorite productivity tool, to make this workflow seamless. So in the next 25 minutes or so, I will guide you through coding a Raycast extension that can capture ideas and send them to Notion with the Notion API. So to create an extension within Raycast, we can simply search for create extension and we will get presented with a dialog for creating our extension. So let's call this content planner. And we can leave the description empty for now. I want to create my extension in my repositories folder, in my Raycast folder. So that makes sense. And for our first command, let's call it create content idea, since that's what we want to do. And we can also leave this empty for now. This is what will show up next to your command in Raycast later on. And for the template, it would make sense to start with a form template, since essentially what we want to do is submit some data to Notion, right? And from here we can just create the extension. It says that our extension is created and we can develop it installing our dependencies and using npm run dev to develop it. So let's back out of this for now and let's see what we have in our Raycast directory. So we have our new extension created here. And if we open that one in Visual Studio Code, we can go over the basic structure of the extension created for us. So we have an assets folder which contains our icon, and we have a source folder with our code. This is the code for that initial command we created. Now I have TypeScript errors everywhere because I haven't installed my dependencies yet. We can also take a look at the package.json file because it's here that our commands get defined. And this is the initial command that we created with the extension. So we have create content idea. So for now, let's head to the terminal and install our dependencies. I'm using pnpm instead of npm, but you can use npm here as well. Once those are installed, we should have gotten rid of the TypeScript errors. So you can see we have the file clean without any TypeScript errors. And to develop our extensions from here, we can just run the dev command. When we run that, we can see that within Raycast, we have a new command which is in development right now, create content idea. And if I press it, we have this basic form that is created as a template. The first thing we can do in here is I know we need to talk to the Notion API. So it makes sense to add the Notion HQ client, I think it's called, to communicate with Notion later on. Next up, we need a Notion extension to be able to communicate with Notion. So let's create that next. So if we head over to Notion and go to profile/integration, once we're logged in, you can see we can create new integrations here. So let's create an integration for my own personal workspace. It's an internal one. So let's call it Content Planner, the same name as the Raycast extension. And we can also add an icon here if we want to. But let's save this one for now. And let's go and configure the settings. And here we have the secret, which we want to be able to use. So let's copy that one. To save it, let's for now just paste it in my Raycast notes. So that's the first step done. The extension is created. If we now instead head over to Notion, so we have the databases where we want to put our ideas, which is in the template I showed you before. So if we head over to the content schedule, which is the database where we want to put the ideas, first of all, we need to get the ID of this database. I used to get the ID by copying the link. And if we go back to Raycast notes, let's paste the link here. And the database ID would be the first part up until the question mark here. So let's extract that and then just say IDs database. And then we also want the ID of the platforms database because we want to be able to get the platforms within the extension as well. So if we head back to Notion here and click on platforms, do the same thing, share, copy the link, paste it, and just extract the database ID, which is this, and paste it there. So this is all the information we need to communicate to Notion later on. We have the API key of our Notion application we created, and we have the two database IDs, which we will need later. So let's get out of those ones. Another thing we need to do is we need to enable our new Notion integration to be able to talk to those databases, and we can do that from here. So under connections, you should probably see your new integration called Content Planner here. So let's click that one and confirm. This application will now have access to this database. And we need to do it for our ideas database as well. So click connections, Content Planner, confirm. And now we're all hooked up to Notion and we should be able to start developing. So let's head back to VS Code and let's do that next. So now we can start developing our extension. So the first thing I will do is creating a Notion service, which will make us able to talk to Notion. So I'm creating a lib folder with a Notion file in it. And in this file, let's set up a class called Notion service. And in this one, we need to do some quick setup. So let's create a client. So private client, which should be of type client from Notion HQ client. And then we need something to hold our database IDs. So let's create our ideas database ID, and that should be a string, and then also our platform database ID, which should also be a string. And once we have that, let's make a constructor as Copilot already suggests. What Copilot suggests though is that we should put those values that we have here within our Raycast nodes in our environment. But what I think would make more sense is to have those values within our extension settings instead. And for that, Raycast has something called preferences. So let's set up preferences by creating a preferences array within here. The first thing we want a preference for is our Notion API key. It could be called Notion API key. We have a description as well. Should be of type password to be able to hide the fields. And we also want to say that it's required true. So that's the first one. And then we need a preference for our Notion database ID as well, which should also be of type password. And let's call it Notion IDs database ID, Notion IDs database ID, and the ID of the Notion database you want to use for IDs. That makes sense. And let's create a last one for Notion platforms database ID, platforms database ID, use for platforms. And that should be it. The nice thing now is that if we go to our extension, which we are developing, and we're pressing create content idea, let's restart the development server and run it again. So if we go into here now, instead of getting to the form, we first need to set up those required fields. And here we simply put our API key and the IDs of the databases. And if we press continue from here, we get back to the form again. And now let's close this. When we go to create a new content idea, we get directly to the form. And we can also check the extension settings, configure extension. And you can see that we have our extension settings as with any other Raycast extension, where we store our API keys and database IDs in here instead of in the code. So next up, we need to grab those from the Raycast preferences instead. And we can do that by accessing those preferences by creating a new const preferences like this. And let's grab them from get preference values, and that should be of type preferences. And within this preferences const, we should now be able to access our keys. So let's say preferences. You can see we have it typed here. So we have the Notion API key, and we should have the database ID of the IDs database, and we should have the database ID of the platform database. So with all of that set up, we know we can communicate with Notion through our API. And the first thing I want to do here is to create some kind of service to get the platforms, right? Let's create a function that is called get platforms, because I know I want to be able to get the platforms from our Notion database. I also know that I want a function for submitting ideas, right, from within our Raycast extension. So let's create a function for create idea. And within here, we can set up the logic for getting the platforms and creating the ideas. But before we do that, it would make sense to go and change this basic template we have here to have something that suit our extension better. So now it would make sense to start creating our form. And if we take a look at how it looks right now, we can use some of these basic templates to actually create our form. And what we would probably need is a title for our idea, right? And we want some kind of description to fill the content of the page. And we probably want some kind of drop down where we can select the specific platform that we want to create the idea for. Let's start by removing some of these fields that we don't need. So I would say everything but the first text field, the first text area, and the drop down. If we take a look at the file, let's keep the text field, the text area, the separator, but remove the date picker, the checkbox, and the tag picker. So if we just remove those and save and take a look, now it looks much cleaner. Honestly, I think we can remove it to have a cleaner form. So now we have a form that looks like this, and this text field could probably have title that is called title, and this could be called description. Describe your idea, name your idea, no default values, and this would be our platforms. Select platform, maybe. Select platform, and this we should populate with the platforms we have in our platform database, and here you should be able to input your idea name and your idea description. So the first thing we want to do is probably to get the platforms, so we can populate this. And to get the platforms, let's set up the function we created within our Notion service here. Let's get a response from Notion where we pass the database ID of the platforms database, and let's loop over this response. We want to return the response results. We want to map over it. So let's call it platform, makes sense. And within here, we want to return the icon for the platform ID, and the name. Let's return an object with the ID of the platform icon first, the platform ID, and the platform name. Okay, so you can see we have some TypeScript problems. So the first thing we can do is to console log this platform to just see how it looks. But this is not called from anywhere right now. So to be able to call it, let's head back to our content idea. We want to set up some state for our platforms. So set up platforms and set platforms, use state, and maybe a loading state as well, makes sense. And then within a use effect hook, let's set up fetch platforms. And we want to get some data from our Notion service that we just created, and get platforms, yes. And this Notion service, of course, needs to be imported. Import Notion service from libnotion. Okay, so let's export the Notion service from here. And now we can import it like this. And we should be able to use it down here. Let's get our platforms and then set them like that. And if we have an error, let's catch that. And now we can actually use the show toast from within Raycast. So we have a show toast where we can say failed to fetch platforms. And let's finish this one by setting the loading to false. Maybe that's better in a finally call here. So finally set loading to false and finish this use effect hook. Now we have this method in here, and let's finally also call it. And now if we create a content idea, so I found the error. So I had input the wrong database IDs because I copied them from Raycast Note as links. So I just re-inputted my database IDs, and now I should see that I get my platforms here. So now that I can see here how a platform looks, that it's an object of type page, I can see I have the icon and so on. I can see I have a parent database, which is my platforms database, and I have all the properties of each platform here. So that's good. We know that the fetching of the platforms work. What we need to do next is to go here and make these return statement work. And right now you can see that the custom emoji looks like this, so we should probably grab the URL of the emoji. But I think we will have a TypeScript problem if we do that. But let's head into icon and then go into custom emoji, for example. And then we need to get the URL, right? And then also, so let's ignore these TypeScript errors for now. But we need to get the platform ID. This should be the correct way to get the ID. We have no TypeScript errors there. And for the name, we should also get the properties, name, title, and plain text. So this should work, even though we have some TypeScript errors. Let's figure those out later, but let's head back into the content here and actually use our new platforms. For the form dropdown, instead of this single item here, we want to, let's also call this platform maybe. And this is probably better called title and description. Within this dropdown, I want to go over our platforms and map each platform and create a new drop-down item with the platform ID as a key. That makes sense. And for the value, let's also use the platform ID. And for the title, let's have the platform name, and then we want the icon as well. So icon, let's remove this one, and let's remove this one, and let's make that self-closing so we see a bit better. And for the icon, I want the source of platform icon, which was the URL, right? And then we can also round the icons off a bit by using a mask. So we can have image, this is called image mask, rounded rectangle, for example, to just round the borders a bit. So if we fire this up again, we see that we get our platforms from within our Notion database with platforms. Let me see the platforms. So we have YouTube, Blog, Blue Sky, X, and LinkedIn. And if we head back here, we have all those platforms here. So it works good, but we have some TypeScript errors. The first error is that this icon does not exist on all of these types of responses. So we need to make sure that this is a full page response. So within this results map here, we can, let's remove the logging of the platform. We can use something like this. So this uses a function from the Notion client to check that the platform is a full page type. Now we have new problems. The first problem is that that platform icon is possibly null, but we also have a problem that custom emoji does not exist on type emoji request. So what I did is I will copy it in here. I created my own type for this. So let's import this one. So I created my own type for the Notion icon to be able to say that this should also be able to be of this format with Notion, which Notion actually returns to me. And then we can just say that the icon is of this type. So it's either the regular Notion icon that Notion types provide, or it's of this type. And then we should probably be able to use this icon. So if we have an icon and if custom emoji is in icon, we can use the URL. Otherwise, we just say undefined for now. So that fixes the TypeScript errors for the icon. For the title, we kind of having the same problem. Notion's types are not that good. So what I went ahead and did is I created my own type for a specific title as well. And then we can just say that we have a title property, which is platform properties name, but of this type instead. And then we can probably use this title property within here, just replace that. And now it knows that it can access, because I know that if we have platform properties name filled, it will be in this format. So we should be good like this. And now we have gotten rid of the types and it still works. It fetches the platforms for us. To finish things off for good measure, for getting the platform here, one thing we could do is also wrap this in a try catch call. So we can catch the error and say that we failed to fetch platforms is if this didn't succeed. What we also can do within here is on the form, we can use this loading state we created and say that loading, not like that, is loading, it is called. So we disable the form if the platform fetching is loading. So now that we create an idea, you can see that we have some kind of loading state up there where when it fetches the platforms, and then we have the form. Next thing we need to do is to actually create something when we input something here and submit the form. Right now it just logs it to the console because we have this handle submit function, which basically console logs the values and shows a toast, which is what we see down here when we submit. Let's handle this by creating some kind of handle submit function. What we want to do in this function instead of this is actually to try to access that method that we created on Notion services. So let's await Notion services, create idea and pass the values. And if we're successful, let's show success that the idea is created. And if we have an error, let's show another toast where we say that we failed to create the idea in Notion. We also obviously need to have this as an async function. Since we're awaiting our Notion services within here. So let's move it outside of this command and create an async function of this instead. So we have const handle submit, which is equal to an async function that looks like that. For our idea values, we need to create a type, and we have that type here. It's not actually equal to what we have in the form anymore. As you remember, we called them title, description, and platform, right? So let's create a title of type string, description of type string, and platform of type string. And now these values should be good, and we haven't set up this function yet, so that's why we have errors here. So let's head over to this Notion service and let's fold the get platforms and instead focus on how we should create this idea. So first of all, we need to make sure that we have the values, because that's what it complained about before. So let's put the values here, and we want values, which we probably need to export also from here. Export, type values, and then let's import those values here. Import values from create content idea. Now that this function accepts the values, we should have no errors within here anymore. And once we have the values in the create idea function, what we want to do here is also, yet again, another try catch, where we, in the try, will try to await the Notion API. So let's see what Copilot has for us. It wants to create a page, which looks good. And the parent should be of the ideas database, also good. So I know I want an icon for every entry. So type of emoji, and then I want, in my ideas database, I have this icon, I think. So let's move back here and look at the ideas. Yeah, they have that icon. So let's use that. For the properties, we want a name, that's true. And we want to format it kind of like this. So we want name and we want title. And in title, we want actually an object that looks like this. We want to add text, and that should be values title. And why is that not okay? I spelled it wrong. So let's go back here. Title. Okay, so we have the title. Let's remove that. Let's remove everything from here. Okay, now we have good formatting. So we have the name property. The next property I want to have is I want to submit the platform, of course. So platform, and that should be a relation actually. And then we know that the ID of that relation should be of the value platform that we select from the select field. After the platform, we also want some children, because we don't have any property called description. So children, and within children, that's an array, because this is the body of the Notion page. And we will have an object, which will be of a Notion block, which is a paragraph. Paragraph should contain some rich text. And this rich text should contain an object of type text with the value description within it. And again, we have some type of error here. What's up with that? So we have the rich text, and we need to close this one. And we can't have type paragraph within this. It's very weird. I put the children in the wrong place, I think. So let's move the children out of the properties. It should be outside the properties. I think that's it. And we also created a catch statement where we say failed to create idea, which is good. And within our handle submit, we call this create idea function. So let's see what happens when we try to create an idea now. So let's name this test idea. And just a description, and let's say it's for a YouTube video. Let's try to submit this form, and we get success idea created. So let's check Notion. Let's go back to the brand hub. We have the test idea. Within the test idea, we have just a description. We have YouTube selected as a platform. Let's quickly recap what we built today. We started with a Notion template for managing content ideas, then created a custom Raycast extension that lets us capture those ideas instantly, right from our keyboard. This combination gives us the best of both worlds, Notion's powerful organization with Raycast lightning-fast access. You can get started right now by downloading my Notion template using the link below. I've designed it to be customizable so you can adapt it to your specific needs. As for the Raycast extension we built, I decided not to publish it directly to the Raycast store, because the real power comes from customizing it to your specific workflow. Instead, I put all the code I wrote today in GitHub. You can use it as a starting point and modify it to fit your exact needs. The link to the repository is in the description. If you found this helpful, consider subscribing for more content about building custom tools and improving your workflow. I'd love to see how you customize this system, so share your ideas and modifications in the comments below. If you're considering Raycast Pro for their powerful AI features, you can get 10% off using my affiliate link in the description. Want to dive deeper into Raycast? Check out these videos where I explore more of its capabilities. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.